All right, hello, my name is Joshua, and many states around the U.S., sex ed is undertaught, insufficient, and ill prepares young adults for sexual relationships in the future. The main reason that this is occurring is because our government is continuously funneling millions and millions of dollars into abstinence-only curriculums into public schools. Abstinence only is, if you're unaware, is waiting to have sexual intercourse until you are married. Ironically, many of these states that do have these abstinence-only programs ill prepare their students for sexual relationships. My main claim is that federal and state-funded abstinence-only programs negatively affects young adults. I would support this claim by 1, abstinence-only programs just don't work. 2, abstinence-only programs have a negative psychological and physiological effect on young adults. And 3, these programs advance stereotypes and prejudices. So to go on to my first point, abstinence programs just don't work. These programs are inefficient. In the Mathematica research report submitted to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that youth in these programs they're no more likely to have abstained from sex compared to the comprehensive sexual education counterparts. This clearly shows that being told over and over and over just to not have sex, it wouldn't change that fact. Many students now are being pressured by the media, by their peers, by society that they want this. According to the National Campaign to Prevent Teen and Unplanned Pregnancies, both New Mexico and Mississippi, both that have abstinence-only programs, have the highest teen pregnancy rates at 90 and 93 women per 1,000. Again, both of these states have abstinence-only programs and do not allow schools to teach comprehensive sexual education. To continue my point, these programs contain false information about sex. In a report to the House of Representatives, many programs have contained false information about the effectiveness of contraceptives, condoms, and abortion. They've also contained false information about HIV. For example, many curriculums actually propose that HIV could be transmitted through tears and even sweat. This will lead young adults to believe that there is no reason to even protect themselves because they believe that protecting themselves wouldn't even work. And again, many of these students don't even abstain from sex. To go on to my second point, abstinence-only programs have negative effects on psychological and physiological effects. First, the psychological effects. Many students that do not get the comprehensive sexual education are blamed and even shamed for their natural sexual feelings and responses. This will lead to isolation, depression, and could even possibly lead to suicide and suicidal thoughts. Yes, it may not be the actual cause, as home life and other factors could play in, but it would be better if schools were supportive and instead of blaming their students for having these natural feelings, actually supporting them and explaining what they are going through. Abstinence-only programs also could have negative physiological effect on young adults. In Josh Korngold's Moral Pluralism and Sexual Education, many parents lack the resources, training, and capability to provide adequate sexual education on their own. If these programs, instead of being on the parent side, was on people who were trained, science teachers, biology teachers, this will improve the actual physiological effects and negative effects like STDs, STIs, and give students protections and options than just saying, don't do it. We'll prepare them. Finally, on my third point, abstinence-only programs advance stereotypes and prejudices. Abstinence-only programs are heterosexist. See, in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community, abstinence-only defined as waiting until marriage, and a lot of the states that do implement this don't have marriage equality. How is that supposed to make a teenager feel when he's in this position that he is just, the school is completely unsupportive of what his everything he's going through, or she. Abstinent-only programs also advance stereotypes on women and men. Many curriculums with abstinent-only education treat stereotypes as fact. For example, this is in a curriculum reported to the House. One curriculum teaches that women need financial support while men need admiration. Others instruct women gauge their happiness and judge their success on their relationships. Men's happiness and success hinge on their accomplishments. We cannot let schools teach these stereotypes in these abstinent-only programs. Therefore, to go back to my main claim, federal and state-funded abstinent-only programs negatively affects young adults. Thank you.
All right, Joshua, remember when I said about the propositions being phrased in an objective way? I think that you do that, but before you get to your proposition, you've got a whole bunch of presuppositions built into the argument to justify talking about the proposition that don't ever get developed, and I think that that's a little bit problematic. When you get to the proposition, it is clearly stated. I think that's good. I think you've got a good layout of the secondary claims also. Now, as you signpost on the first point, that's fine, so I can tell what you're talking about. The evidence on that first point, though, is a little bit spotty because the one information that you have suggests that the abstinence-only programs are no more effective than comprehensive sex education programs. Neither of those says that how effective either one is. It just says one is not more effective than the other. So I'm not exactly sure that that shows that it doesn't work. And if it does, and if they don't work and they are equivalent, then it sounds like the comprehensive programs aren't working very much either. So I think you can find better data on this. And I know there's a ton of better data on this because I've had this argument already presented in another class where there was just all kinds of data dump on the effectiveness of these programs. So I think that you've probably missed the most useful information on this particular argument. You got to be careful about the comparisons between the states. You basically are making an inference of causality on the two examples of Mississippi and New Mexico. And I think the state comparisons are a good way to maybe generate some statistical information for the purpose of making an argument, but we didn't get much comparison except for those two states and what their rates were. And like I said, I think that there's more useful data out there for you for these particular points. The claim about misinformation, I think, is really vague. You've got a statement here that says that sometimes there's information that comes out incorrectly, like you mentioned the HIV thing, getting it through tears, and then there's a suggestion later on. I don't know when that information came out or what's going on there. I do know that I heard those kinds of arguments 20 years ago. I don't know that they continue to be part of abstinence-only programs, and I don't know if they're in the curriculum of abstinence-only programs because you don't really describe those curriculums except for the occasional odd incident. So you've got some examples of that, but whether or not those examples are generalizable to the abstinence-only programs, I think that's a little bit problematic. The issue of them being homosexist, I think, is an interesting one because one of the key issues about abstinence-only would the discussion of contraception be homosexist?
What? Can you repeat that?
Yeah. In other words, if you were talking about contraception, since homosexual couples don't have to worry about pregnancy, isn't that homosexist because you're excluding them the same way that you're saying that gay kids would be excluded because you're talking about states without marriage equity laws. This idea of being homosexist, that's an interesting concept. It sounds to me like it's a value argument, and it's an idea that hasn't been thoroughly thought about, because
Right.
I mean, that was the first thing that popped into my head. Well, if I'm telling kids, that you have to avoid pregnancy, well, I'm sorry. Homosexual relationships, unless you're going to a doctor or getting artificial insemination or something like that, there's no chance of pregnancy in those situations. So that seems to me like it fits the criteria that you're talking about. Like I said, I think it's an interesting idea, but it's a value argument, and it's not well thought out here.
Okay.
All right. I thought that you presented it pretty effectively, and like I said, it was well organized. I just think there's some information that you need, especially on that first and second
Right.
point, that would work a little bit better for you. All right.